You wake up sweating from a nightmare where your bank account had zeros, but then you realize you're already living it. Except you're in Budapest, July 1946, and your money isn't just gone, it's dying in real time. Yesterday, your morning coffee cost what you used to make in a week. Today, it costs what you used to make in 2 weeks. By tonight, a month's salary won't buy that same cup. Your life savings, everything you worked for, every sacrifice you made, worth less than the napkin you cry into. Feel that knot in your stomach? That's not just hunger, though you are starving. That's the primal terror of watching the foundation of civilization collapse beneath your feet. Everything you believed about security, about working hard, about saving for tomorrow, all of it revealed as elaborate lies. The air tastes like fear and fresh ink from printing presses that won't stop, can't stop, churning out money that dies before it's born. You hold bills worth millions and can't buy bread. You carry briefcases full of billions and children laugh at your poverty. Dark wrote that money is the sinew of war. But what happens when that sinew rots? When currency becomes the perfect symbol of a nation bleeding out in its own infected wounds? The Pengő did not die of natural causes. It was murdered, slowly and methodically, by history's relentless machinery itself. The numbers whisper secrets that break human minds. 41.9 quadrillion % monthly inflation. Read that again. Let those syllables roll off your tongue like a death sentence, because that's exactly what they are. You hold money in your palm at sunrise, and by noon it's worth half as much. By sunset, it's worth nothing. The Pengő was dying faster than your own cells regenerate, faster than your heart beats, faster than you can even count the zeros sprawling across increasingly worthless banknotes. Economists still struggle to calculate these rates properly because the mathematics themselves become obscene, pornographic in their impossibility. How do you measure the speed at which an entire concept, the very idea of value, bleeds out? This wasn't just economic failure, this was systematic murder, the assassination of meaning itself. Every transaction became a funeral rite, every purchase a small death in the cathedral of collapsed civilization. You watch shopkeepers weigh money instead of counting it, because counting takes too long and the numbers change faster than human speech can follow. Children play with stacks of billion Pengő notes like building blocks, constructing castles from the corpse of their nation's dreams. But these numbers have faces. These statistics have names, have families, have stories that will make you understand how quickly the civilized world can become a mathematical nightmare. Hungary didn't stumble into this abyss. It was pushed by the ghosts of 2 wars that refused to stay buried. Picture a nation already bleeding from World War I's wounds when 1939 arrived like a fever dream. The Second War didn't just wound Hungary, it performed vivisection on a living country. By 1945, 40% of its infrastructure lay in twisted ruins. Factories stood like broken teeth in a skull's mouth. Railways twisted into abstract sculptures of defeat. Half of all industrial capacity, gone, simply erased, as if a god had reached down and deleted entire cities from existence. But the cruelest wound was invisible: the debt. Hungary had borrowed astronomical sums to feed Nazi Germany's war machine. Money poured into the furnace of fascist ambitions that would never, could never, be repaid. Every Pengő printed to service that debt was printed with the blood of a nation that had gambled its soul and lost everything. You walk through Budapest in 1945 and see a country hemorrhaging from every economic artery. The seeds of hyperinflation weren't planted in 1946. They were sown in the scorched earth left by jackboots and dive bombers, fertilized with the tears of widows and the ash of burned dreams. This was tragic inevitability dressed as economic policy. The hyperinflation wasn't coming. It was already here, lurking in every bombed-out building, every unpaid debt, every impossible promise made to survive just one more day. The Hungarian government stared into the abyss and made a choice that would haunt history: let the nation starve or print money to keep it breathing. They chose survival. In choosing survival, they chose destruction. The logic was perversely beautiful in its simplicity. People need food. Food costs money. No money exists. Therefore, create money. Print it. Press it. Manufacture hope from thin air and government promises. The central bank's printing presses worked 24 hours a day, churning out banknotes like a factory of false salvation. You can almost hear them. Mechanical hearts beating frantically in the chest of a dying economy. Each thump, 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 another million pengos bleeding into circulation. The officials knew. God, they knew. They watched their own currency metastasize like cancer. Each new banknote a tumor growing on the corpse of fiscal responsibility. But what choice did they have? Watch children starve, or print another billion pengos to buy another day's bread. The printing presses became weapons of mass economic destruction, each sheet of currency a bullet fired into the heart of Hungarian stability. The cure had become deadlier than the disease, but the patient was already dying, and stopping the medicine felt like murder. Every morning brought fresh horror, new denominations, larger numbers, smaller value, deeper despair. Every dawn became a funeral for yesterday's money. You wake up and run, literally run. To spend your salary before lunch steals half its value. The streets of Budapest fill with people sprinting toward shops like refugees fleeing an invisible war. Because that's exactly what you are. Refugees from the concept of time itself. Store owners scribble new prices over old ones again and again, until the paper tears from the weight of erasure. By noon, yesterday's price list looks like ancient history. By evening, this morning's numbers feel like childhood memories, distant and impossible. Children build castles from 100 million pengo notes, their laughter echoing through streets where adults weep over worthless wallets. These aren't toys, they're the bones of a dead economy dressed up as playthings. The irony tastes like copper and despair. You watch marriages dissolve under the pressure, not from lack of love, but from the impossibility of planning beyond the next meal. How do you promise until death do us part, when your wedding savings become worthless before the ceremony ends? Elderly couples sit on park benches, pockets stuffed with billions of pengos, starving. They hold more money than kings once possessed, yet cannot afford bread. Their wrinkled hands count bills that multiply like cancer cells. More, always more, worth always less. The fundamental concept of value had shattered like glass, and every Hungarian bled from walking barefoot through its jagged remains. Sartre said hell is other people, but in Budapest hell was having pockets full of money that meant nothing at all. Desperation breeds innovation, but sometimes innovation breeds monsters. January 1946, Hungarian economists, drunk on their own intelligence, birthed the adopengo, the tax pengo, a currency index to maintain stable value, engineered with mathematical precision to outsmart inflation itself. They believed they could solve hell with arithmetic, cure economic cancer with cleverer equations. The adopengo was beautiful in theory, a hybrid creature designed to combine stability with flexibility, immune to the virus killing its predecessor. For a few precious weeks it worked. Prices stabilized. Hope flickered like a candle in the economic darkness. But inflation is patient. Inflation is cunning. It studied this new prey, learned its weaknesses, adapted. The adopengo began to mutate. The same disease that devoured the pengo infected its replacement, transforming Hungary's mathematical salvation into another victim. The index currency, designed to be inflation-proof, caught the hyperinflation virus and became patient zero for an even more grotesque strain. You watch economists panic as their perfect creation writhes and dies in real time. Their formulas become meaningless hieroglyphs. Their models collapse like houses built on quicksand. The adopengo's death was faster, more violent than even the pengos, a mercy killing that felt like prolonged torture. Hungary had tried to engineer its way out of economic hell, and instead built a better mousetrap for catching monetary death itself. Then came history's most expensive piece of paper. 100 million billion pengos. Read those words again. Let them dissolve on your tongue like communion wafers made of pure economic blasphemy. 100,000 pengos. 20 zeros marching across a banknote like soldiers in formation. Each zero a small death in the army of meaninglessness. This wasn't just currency. It was abstract art painted with the blood of a dying civilization. You hold this note, if you're lucky enough to find one, and feel the weight of impossibility. 20 zeros that couldn't purchase a single loaf of bread. 20 zeros that represented humanity's capacity for transforming mathematics into a form of torture. The printing process had become ritualistic. Workers fed sheets into machines like priests performing mass, creating sacraments of absurdity. Each note required manual adjustment. Machines couldn't handle numbers this obscenely large. Human hands literally crafted economic apocalypse 1 zero at a time. This banknote was more than currency. It was a monument to madness, a physical manifestation of what happens when reality breaks down so completely that fiction becomes insufficient. Comedy and tragedy had merged into something beyond both, something that could only exist when human systems devour themselves with mathematical precision. The 100 quintillion Pengő note, history's most elaborate suicide note, written in the language of zeros. But the cruelest victims were the children who learned to count with money that meant nothing. Imagine being 7 years old and discovering that the numbers adults obsess over are elaborate lies. Imagine learning arithmetic with banknotes that become worthless before you finish your homework. These children, the inflation generation, grew up thinking money was just colorful paper because for them, it literally was. Little Marta wheels her school lunch money to class in a cart, billion Pengő notes stacked like bricks. By recess, she needs twice as much. By dismissal, her lunch money could buy dinner for a family, if anyone still accepted Pengős, which increasingly no one did. You watch these children play with currency like confetti, their laughter echoing through streets where their parents weep silently. They build towers from trillion Pengő notes, not understanding they're constructing monuments to their nation's death. Their parents' faces tell the real story, the way mothers' hands tremble when counting salary that won't buy milk, the way fathers stare at walls holding briefcases full of worthless billions, trying to explain to their children why yesterday's riches became today's garbage. These children became living archaeologists of economic collapse, witnesses to the moment when one of humanity's most sacred concepts, that money has meaning, revealed itself as consensual hallucination. When the consensus broke, so did their world. They learned mathematics using the corpse of their nation's currency, addition and subtraction practiced on the bones of financial civilization itself. When official currency dies, unofficial currency is born from its rotting flesh. Budapest's black markets bloomed like toxic flowers in the wasteland of the Pengő's grave. Cigarettes became gold bars. American dollars transformed ordinary citizens into underground millionaires. Eggs bought more respect than bank vaults full of Hungarian bills. You navigate these shadow bazaars where morality twists into impossible shapes. Grandmothers become smugglers, trading family heirlooms for bread. Teachers moonlight as currency dealers, converting worthless Pengős into precious Swiss francs at rates that change faster than heartbeats. The perverse justice of hyperinflation reveals itself here. Those who hoarded soap and sugar became rich, while those who trusted banks became destitute. Physical goods reign supreme in this upside-down kingdom, where a bar of chocolate commands more purchasing power than a briefcase full of official currency. Black market profiteers accumulate genuine wealth while watching their nation hemorrhage dignity. They trade in the only currency that matters now, things you can touch, eat, burn for warmth. Reality over abstraction, substance over promise. The moral mathematics are devastating. Survival requires criminality, while honesty guarantees starvation. You steal to eat, trade illegally to live, violate laws to remain human. Budapest had become a city where the only honest currency was dishonest, where the only legal tender was illegal behavior, where salvation came wrapped in the language of sin. The world watched Hungary die in real time and found it fascinating. International economists gathered around Hungary like vultures circling carrion, notebooks ready to document each spasm of economic death. Foreign correspondents filed reports that read like science fiction, entire salaries spent on single loaves of bread, banknotes weighed instead of counted, a modern nation regressing to medieval barter in the span of months. The voyeuristic quality of global attention turned Hungary's suffering into intellectual entertainment. Economic professors used Hungarian data in their lectures, pointing at charts that represented millions of ruined lives. Government officials studied Hungary's collapse like a laboratory experiment, taking careful notes on how quickly civilization could disintegrate. How fascinating, they whispered in conference rooms thousands of miles away. How educational. They treated hyperinflation like a natural disaster, tragic but illuminating, destructive but scientifically valuable. Hungary had become the world's economic patient zero, a living autopsy performed before an international audience hungry for data. The mixture of sympathy and curiosity was obscene, genuine concern contaminated by academic fascination. The nation bled alone while foreign observers took careful notes, cataloging each symptom of monetary death for future reference. Hungary's apocalypse had become the world's education. But what happens to the human mind when money becomes meaningless? When the fundamental concept of value evaporates like morning mist? You work 8 hours and earn wages that die before you reach the store. The psychological mathematics are devastating. Effort multiplied by time equals nothing. Labor plus sweat plus hope equals zero. The equation of existence itself breaks down. Hungarian minds began fragmenting like currency values, sanity measured in percentage points that only move downward. When your life savings become worthless overnight, what happens to your concept of security? When decades of labor vanish in mathematical abstraction, what happens to your sense of self? Suicide rates exploded alongside inflation. Divorce certificates multiplied faster than banknotes. Mental hospitals filled with patients whose only disease was watching their reality dissolve in real time. Depression became the nation's true currency, the only thing that maintained stable value. Workers stared at their paychecks like archaeological artifacts from a lost civilization. Mothers counted money while crying, the physical act of addition becoming a form of self-torture. Fathers sat in silence, holding briefcases full of billions, psychologically paralyzed by mathematical impossibility. The hyperinflation infected more than money. It infected memory, hope, the basic human ability to plan beyond the next hour. Minds inflated like prices, expanding into madness as quickly as Pengő expanded into worthlessness. Time itself became meaningless when money became meaningless. Yet even as their currency disintegrated in real time, Hungarian officials maintained the fiction of control. Picture cabinet meetings where decisions made at breakfast became economically extinct by lunch. Ministers delivered speeches about recovery, while their own salaries evaporated mid-sentence. Policy documents drafted in the morning contained numbers that had inflated beyond mathematical comprehension before the ink dried. The tragic comedy of governmental denial played out on a stage built from economic rubble. Officials spoke in percentages while reality spoke in impossibilities. They announced measures to stabilize inflation rates that doubled every 15 hours, like doctors prescribing aspirin for decapitation. You watch these men in expensive suits, holding briefcases full of worthless billions, conducting meetings as if gravity still functioned normally. They debate fiscal policy while the very concept of fiscal policy burns around them like a house fire they refuse to acknowledge. The disconnect between political theater and economic reality became grotesque performance art. Ministers signed laws whose numbers became meaningless before the signatures dried. Parliament debated budgets that required scientific notation to express mathematical abstractions that had lost all connection to bread, milk, survival. Power structures maintained their rituals even as foundations crumbled beneath them. The government continued governing a currency that no longer existed, ruling over an economy that had already died. Hungary needed more than policy. Hungary needed resurrection. August 1, 1946. Hungary performed economic surgery on itself, not reform, but assassination and resurrection combined in a single desperate act. The Forint was born from the Pengő's corpse at an exchange rate so extreme it required scientific notation. 400 octillion Pengő for one new Forint. Let that number dissolve on your tongue like a communion wafer made of pure mathematical impossibility. Overnight, every Hungarian woke up economically reborn, or economically dead, depending on how you counted. Life savings that took decades to accumulate became literally nothing. Bank accounts full of billions transformed into empty ledgers. Families went to sleep with wealth measured in trillions and woke up with nothing but hope in unfamiliar currency. The psychological challenge was overwhelming. How do you trust money again after watching money reveal itself as elaborate fiction? How do you believe in new currency when old currency just finished teaching you that all currency is consensual hallucination? You watch Hungarians handle forint notes like they might bite. Tentative, suspicious, traumatized. These bills felt different, looked different, but could they be trusted? Would this new money die the same death as the Pengő? The government promised stability with religious fervor. Exchange offices opened like confession booths where citizens traded their economic sins, wheelbarrows full of worthless Pengő, for absolution in the form of crisp, intimidating forint notes. But promises had been made before, and promises had been broken by mathematics themselves. Then the impossible happened. The forint worked, instantly, completely, miraculously. Within weeks, Hungary had achieved something that seemed supernatural. Perfect price stability after experiencing the worst hyperinflation in human history. Store owners stopped changing prices hourly, their hands cramped from months of constant scribbling over obsolete numbers. Wages regained meaning. Suddenly, a day's work could buy a day's food, and that equation remained stable from sunrise to sunset. The mathematical relationship between effort and reward, broken for so long it felt like a myth, reassembled itself as if touched by economic, divine intervention. You watch Hungarians tentatively trust money again. They hold forint notes carefully, waiting for the familiar sting of watching value evaporate in real time. But the sting never comes. Prices stay stable. Numbers behave like numbers should. The traumatized nation begins to exhale, releasing breath held for years. The psychological relief was as dramatic as the economic recovery. Minds that had fragmented under monetary pressure began reassembling. Families started planning beyond the next meal. Children learned that money could mean something stable, predictable, real. But this miracle cure raised disturbing questions. If hyperinflation could be stopped instantly by governmental decree, how artificial were all monetary systems? How quickly could any currency be destroyed or recreated? The forint's success revealed both money's fragility and its power, twin truths that would haunt economic thought forever. Behind every economic statistic lies human suffering that can never be fully quantified in any currency, stable or worthless. Count the marriages dissolved under monetary pressure, couples torn apart not by lack of love, but by the impossibility of building futures on evaporating foundations. Count the careers destroyed, skilled artisans reduced to bartering their tools for bread because their expertise became worthless overnight. Remember the elderly who died surrounded by billions of Pengő, their life savings transformed into elaborate suicide notes written in the language of broken mathematics. They had worked their entire lives to accumulate wealth that vanished faster than their final breaths. The children, the children, learned lessons that would scar them forever. They discovered that money is an elaborate lie adults tell themselves, that financial security is an illusion maintained only through collective agreement. When that agreement shattered, so did their ability to trust economic systems. This trauma became generational inheritance, passed down through Hungarian families like a genetic curse. Parents who survived 1946 hoarded physical goods for decades, distrusting banks with religious fervor. They taught their children that paper money was just paper, that only things you could touch and eat and burn possessed real value. These survivors became walking monuments to economic apocalypse, their behaviors encoding the memory of monetary death. They were living tombstones for an economic age that died in Budapest July 1946, when numbers stopped making sense and mathematics became a form of mass torture. Hungary's hyperinflation became textbook material for economists worldwide, but its lessons are written in human ashes, not academic ink. Even today, the ghosts of Hungary's hyperinflation walk through central banks and government offices worldwide, whispering warnings in the language of mathematical nightmares. You see Hungary's shadow in every cryptocurrency crash, every time digital value evaporates in minutes rather than months. Central bankers wake up in cold sweats thinking about runaway inflation, their dreams haunted by printing presses that won't stop churning out worthless paper. The ghosts whisper a constant reminder, if it happened in Budapest, it can happen anywhere. Economic stability is always more fragile than it appears, and the Pengő's death mathematics are always lurking beneath the surface of seemingly stable systems. In the end, Hungary's crisis revealed the most terrifying truth about money. It's all a collective hallucination that only works when everyone agrees to participate. The Pengő's death stripped away the illusions that make modern life possible, exposing currency as mathematical fiction dressed up as reality. We pretend paper has value, numbers have meaning. Banks contain wealth rather than promises. We maintain these beautiful lies because the alternative, economic chaos, is too horrific to acknowledge. But hyperinflation reveals money's true nature, consensual madness controlled by shared belief. When belief dies, so does currency. When currency dies, so does the civilization built upon it. The memory of money haunts us because it forces uncomfortable questions. What would you do if you woke tomorrow and your savings had become worthless overnight? How quickly would your civilized world collapse if money revealed itself as elaborate performance art? Hungary's experience isn't historical curiosity, it's permanent possibility hiding in every modern economy's shadows. The Pengő died, but its mathematical ghost lives forever, waiting for the right conditions to transform your money into trash, your security into nightmare, your future into ash. The arithmetic of collapse is always patient, always watching, always ready.